Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and welcome everyone to the ultimate Superman edition of Movie Goodness. And this will be broken down into a three-parter because we're going through the entire history of Superman. We're gonna explore the comics, his appearances on television, and his appearances on the big screen. So instead of trying to cram it all up into one episode, I'm going to split it into three. We're going to do a three-parter. Part one, Superman in comics. Part two, Superman in television. And part three, Superman on film. So this is part one. We are going to explore the genesis, the origins of this superhero comic book character, which is arguably the greatest superhero of all time. I make it no secret that Batman is my favorite superhero, but I got to give respect where respect is due and call it like it is. Superman is the greatest superhero on God's green earth. There's no other superhero, whether it's DC, Marvel, Image, all the other independent comic book characters. There's no other comic book character that can mount up to Superman. Are there more powerful characters? I would say so. There are a couple that could rival Superman power wise, but in the totality, Superman is the greatest. I mean, he's a Boy Scout. He's the ultimate Boy Scout. And thank God for it, because with his power set, if he was slightly a villain, I'm not even gonna say slightly a villain, just make him an anti-hero. Give him the mentality of Batman, we'll have a problem. We will have a serious problem. Superman has to have the personality that he has with those abilities, or he would take over the world virtually, because nobody can stop him. Superman is the ultimate problem solver. Yes, he does have Achilles heel, heels. He do have quote unquote kryptonite, to hold him back. But aside from those few things, and there's only a few, magic, kryptonite, not very much. But that's beside the point. And in case you're wondering, and you've been living under a rock, or you live on Krypton itself, you would know the reason we are exploring the world of Superman in this ultimate Superman edition. We are about to embark on a brand new film, a brand new adaptation of this character brought to us by James Gunn and DC Films and Warner Brother Pictures, with Superman this time being played by David Cornsweet. It looks good. I mean, going by the promotional material, I haven't seen it yet, but it looks amazing, and I've talked to a few people and they're kind of skeptical, and I understand. I understand. It doesn't have the big excitement level that I had for it when that first teaser trailer was released, but I'm still excited. The reason why my excitement level kind of dipped, and I do have some worries about the film, it looks like it's a lot being thrown into this movie that doesn't involve Superman. It looks like we have a lot of characters in the DC universe that will be in this film. And my fear is it's going to be just a springboard movie for the rest of the DC film slate. Now, don't get me wrong. I know this is the first film that's a part of this new universe that we're getting in DC, amply called the DCU. It it just seems like too much in the first film, and that was my problem with Avengers: Age of Ultron. A decent movie, but it was a springboard movie for the next phase in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I couldn't really get into it because all it was is setup for everything going forward. And I know this is the first film, and so it's supposed to be a setup, but we need to solidify the anchor. And if Superman is the anchor, we really need to get behind this character. Now, everything that I've seen in the trailers and the interviews that you read from the cast and James Gunn, it seems like they got it together, but it remains to be seen. Plus, it's James Gunn. You can say what you want about James Gunn. Any man that can make me feel emotion for a talking tree and a talking raccoon has my undivided attention. So I'm going to put my faith into him that he's going to knock this out the park. But before we get into all of that, let's get into the comics where we were first introduced to this character and go through the history and touch in on some of his greatest moments in comics that I remember reading. Now, if it's not on my list, it's because either I forgot or I didn't read it in the comics. And I know a lot of people probably have their favorite moments in comics that involve Superman. And if you do, of course, leave your comments and wherever you are listening to this show and let me know what is your favorite moment in comic book lore involving Superman. And so let's go through the history. Superman is a comic book series featuring the DC comic superhero as the protagonist. Superman began as one of several anthology features in the national periodic publication Comic Book Action Comics #1 in June of 1938. The comic proved so popular that national periodic publications launched Superman into his own self-titled comic book, the first of any superhero, premiering with the cover date summer 1939. Between 1986 and 2006, it was retitled The Adventures of Superman, while a new series used the title Superman. In May of 2006, it was returned to its original title and numbering. The title was canceled with issue number 714 in 2011 and was relaunched with issue number 1 the following month, which ended its run in 2016. The fourth series was released in June of 2016 and ended in April of 2018, while the fifth series was launched in July of 2018 and ended in June of 2021. The series was replaced by Superman, Son of Kal-El in July of 2021, featuring adventures of Superman's son, John Kent. The sixth Superman series, it was released in February of 2023. Now let's swing back to the beginning here. Who were the creators of Superman? Well, that'll be Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. These were two Jewish immigrants who lived in Cleveland, Ohio in 1938 when they created this god of a human being. Or is he a human being? He's an alien, actually. And they came up with this premise, this character. And the first appearance was in 1938's Action Comics #1 with that iconic cover with Superman lifting the car, have the car over his head. But what we got in that issue was probably one of the greatest origin stories ever known. Well, I say greatest, but well known origin stories ever known. I think people know Superman's origin uh pretty better than they know the origin of Jesus. And that's saying something. That is crazy. Superman was born Kal-El on this fictional planet of Krypton. As a baby, his parents, Jor-El and Laura, they sent him to Earth in a small spaceship shortly before Krypton had just terraformed themselves to death and destroyed the entire planet. His ship landed in countryside near the fictional town of Smallville, Kansas, and he's found and adopted by these two farmers, Martha and Jonathan Kent, and they named him Clark Kent. Clark began developing superhuman abilities such as incredible strength and impenetrable skin, and his adopted parents advised him to use his powers to benefit humanity. And he decided to fight crime as a vigilante. So to protect his personal life, he changed into this colorful costume and used the alias Superman in order to fight crime. So Clark, he resides in Metropolis, which is another fictional city, which, you know, a friend of mine, when we were younger, we always debated, these fictional cities that were in mainly DC, because Marvel pretty much uses actual cities, but DC has these fictional cities, Metropolis, Gotham, and so on, Star City, and all this here. Uh, what is modeled after these cities? What is Metropolis modeled after? New York? You would say New York, and you would probably say Gotham is more Chicago, if anything. That's the way I looked at it. But a friend of mine, he was like, well, Metropolis could be Cleveland, Ohio. And I never thought of it. And, we Googled it. That's how it wasn't that far back ago. But we Googled it and looked around Cleveland. And ironically, just a little side note, parts of this new Superman movie was filmed in Cleveland, which kind of proved his point, his theory. But that's neither here nor there. But he said it was Cleveland because the creators of Superman were from Cleveland. And they have a building there, I think it's the Hall of Records or something like that, which is the model for the Hall of Justice. The same building. It looks like the Halls of Justice that the Justice League are based in. And so all that stuff made sense, but I always like to picture Metropolis as New York because it's the big city. And it just made sense to me. But his argument was, well, Cleveland, Ohio is closer to Kansas than New York is. And I'm like, well, logically, yeah, that does make sense. And that was his big argument. And I really can't fight him on that because when you watch the TV show, Smallville, they were pretty close in proximity. And so it made sense. So I guess I got to concede that, but I never told him that. He probably listening. But that's neither here nor there. But Gotham, I still feel is Chicago. But anywho's, while he's in Metropolis, he works as a journalist at the Daily Planet, a fictional newspaper or a media outlet now, because I don't think it's a newspaper outlet. But at that location, at that place of work, Clark, he found the love interest in a fellow journalist, Lois Lane, his best friend, who is a photographer there at the Daily Planet, Jimmy Olsen. The editor-in-chief there is Perry White, among others there at the Daily Planet. And just a long list of arch enemies and foes he had to face throughout his time in the comics that we're going to touch in on in a little while. But I want to go through some of the influences that Siegel and Shutter used as kind of a template for this character. They didn't just come up with this character's attributes and power sets and stuff on their own. And like everybody, like every great artists or whatever. It's not plagiarism. It's just inspirations for this character. But they read a lot of pulp science fiction and adventure novels in magazines back then, and many stories feature characters with fictional abilities such as telepathic abilities, superhuman strength, and clairvoyance and stuff like that. And so, one character in particular, believe it or not, was John Carter of Mars, which was a novel from Edgar Rice Burroughs, and we saw that movie a few years back, John Carter of Mars, that Disney put out that didn't do too good. I actually didn't mind that movie, but a lot of a lot of the science fiction stuff that we've received over the past, I would say 50 years, maybe even longer than that, was inspired by that novel. Star Wars. George Lucas said that was one of the inspirations for Star Wars, and a lot has been inspired by that book. I think Doom too, if I'm not mistaken, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, John Carter was a human who was transported to Mars, where the low gravity makes him stronger than the natives and allows him to leap in great distances. If you ever saw the movie, and so that was one of the main things that they kind of pulled from that material. Another influence was from the 1930 novel Gladiator, featuring a protagonist named Hugo Danner, who had similar powers as Superman. And so Superman's stance and this attitude that he has was influenced by characters in adventure films around that era, such as the Mark of Zorro and Robin Hood. And the name of Metropolis was taken from the 1927 film of the same name, Metropolis. And so another influence, believe it or not, was Popeye. Yes, the cartoon. That was also an influence for Superman. Clark Kent's harmless facade and dual personality was inspired by protagonists such as Zorro, who, when he's not behind the mask, he's Don Diego de la Vega. And I've never really picked up on that. I always looked at Zorro as an inspiration for Batman, but I could see him being an inspiration for Superman as well. Siegel thought that it would make for interesting dramatic context and good humor by giving a character a secret identity. Another inspiration was slapstick comedian Harold Lloyd, believe it or not. Harold Lloyd's character was a mild-mannered man who find himself abused by bullies, but later in the story slaps and fights back furiously. And so, once again, big inspiration for Superman. Clark Kent is a journalist because Siegel often imagined himself becoming one after leaving school. He that was his dream job. The love triangle between Lois Lane, Clark, and Superman was inspired by Siegel's own awkwardness with girls. The word Superman was not an uncommon name back in the 20s and 30s. That was normally a word or a term used to describe men with great ability, most often athletes or politicians. They were called Supermen. Here's a fact about Superman that a lot of people don't know. When I was younger, we would be in a group of friends. We would talk about, what super power would you want out of all the superheroes? Which one would you want? I don't remember what I said because there's too many to choose from. Me in particular, give me any of them at this point. I'll take it. But I remember a close friend of mine, he had said he wanted to fly like Superman, and I know a lot of people would pick that. And I remember this conversation like it was yesterday, even though I know it was about 40 years ago almost. But I told him, I was like, well, they just, Superman always did. He didn't fly. They changed that. When Superman first started off, he didn't fly. He just leaped a great distance. You know, he would leap, I think, a quarter of a mile. He's able to leap, just jump. But it appeared like he was flying. And eventually they changed it. I want to say around the time like when that old TV show came out with George Reeves. I think that's around the time they changed it. But when he first started off, he was just able to leap tall buildings in a single in a single jump. But regardless, he chose to fly. But that was his pick. I wish I could remember what mine was, but it's not important for this show. Anyways, let's go through 10 of not the greatest moments, but the most important moments that happened throughout comic history involving Superman. And these are just some I could find, that I was able to look up that I remembered. And so I wanted to touch in on these. Now, I know there are many, many more. We're talking close to 100 years of history here, people. So, I mean, it was hard to narrow it down to 10. But here are 10 of the most important moments in Superman comic book history. Number 10, Lex Luthor erased Superman's secret identity from the world. This came in Action Comic number 1050, and it kept off a good year for Superman. Superman had just returned from freeing War World from Mongols' grasp and found a way to replenish his powers, which had been weakened on War World because of the lack of a sun or a yellow sun. And so he returned home, and however, not everyone was happy about Superman's return, and Lex Luthor decided that he was going to strike against Superman like never before. In the story, Lex Luthor used Manchester Black to erase Superman's identity from the entire world, and planting a telepathic compression that killed everybody he tells about his secret identity. Luckily, it doesn't affect his family, who were under the protection of Kryptonian technology and the Justice League as well, because they had, trained themselves to defend against telepathic attacks. So it didn't affect them. And Superman goes after Lex Luthor in their best fight in comics. I mean, they went at it. It was a huge moment in recent Superman history, and it sent Superman comic books to a whole different level. Number 9, Superman reveals his secret identity. Superman's secret identity was always an important part of his character, despite him doing the bare minimum to keep it a secret, other than kind of slunching his shoulders and wearing some bifocals. He did nothing strenuous to hide his secret identity. However, it also seemed like something Superman wouldn't be into. And so one of the best comic book writers in recent memory, Brian Michael Bendis, he decided to do away with it for Superman. In Superman, The Truth Revealed, Superman decides that since his life had been about fighting for truth, it was the first part of his mission statement, his motto. Um, so he called a press conference, and Superman's secret identity always felt very strange in modern day. Superman can be anywhere in the world in the blink of an eye. He can protect his family from anyone in the world. Superman's secret identity felt like an unneeded throwback. And so it was pretty much done away with in the comics, at least in that issue, Superman, The Truth Revealed. Number 8, Superman realized he's losing his powers. Superman Volume 5, number 29, in Action Comics number 1029, which is recent. In the last couple of years, this happened. Superman and his son John were together and called to a satellite that was under attack by aliens, alien forces. I don't forgot what aliens they were, but the fight seemed to be going fine with John's increased powers affecting the aliens greatly. However, Superman makes a terrible discovery. The aliens can hurt him. And so this story established that Superman's powers were weakening. This was a major turning point in the life of Superman, leading into Superman and the Authority, and then War World saga that took place after this. And it was also the writer Philip Kennedy Johnson's first issues writing Superman. Johnson had been doing amazing work on the Man of Steel for the last few years, making this event doubly important. And I would employ anybody, if you want to jump back in and read some comic issues, read the War World saga. That was awesome. I loved that read, man. I had downloaded that digitally. That was a nice read. Number 7, the pre-Flashpoint Superman returns. If you know, the new 52 changed everything for DC heroes and the villains as well. Uh, it was a lot of criticism about the new 52. I was excited at first, but it quickly it quickly went downward for me with the new 52s. That's why they hurried up and changed them. But yeah, it changed it back, I should say. But anyways, while it started off well enough, things took a dive, and another change was very much necessary. And that's where DC Rebirth number 1 came along. And it wasn't a reboot per se. It just brought back some things from the pre-Flashpoint era of the DC universe, including his family, Clark Kent's family of Clark, Lois, and John. A lot of that had changed in the 52s, or the new 52s. The family had been back for a little bit at this point, but after the death of the new 52 Superman, DC Rebirth number 1 brought the Kent family back as the main Kents in the DC multiverse. And so Clark became Superman, Lois started working at the Daily Planet, John became the family sidekick. The Rebirth era of DC brought back this fan favorite family, which, bode well for the future of Superman. But to be honest with you, the Rebirths really saved DC, because 52s, 52s, the new 52s just made no sense to me. it was really silly. And that brings me to number 6. The new 52 brought a new Superman. Flashpoint made huge changes to DC, kicking off the new 52s. This controversial reboot started the DC multiverse from scratch, combining heroes and villains from the Wildstorm universe and the Vertigo horror characters with DC's finest. Superman was given an entire new history, one that called back the Golden Age roots as a man of the people and batterer of corruption and whatnot. Superman was no longer married to Lois. He began a relationship with Wonder Woman. Yeah, they were jigging. Instead of his classic costume, he wore ceremonial Kryptonian armor. Yeah, new 52 Superman tenure was it had some highs, but it had a lot of lows too. you know, but ultimately this version of the character ended up dying after his powers went haywire, and nobody has missed him since. Nobody, you couldn't connect with him. It's hard enough connecting to the character of Superman, But the new 52 version, it was virtually impossible. Number 5, the birth of John Kent. Yes, the son of Superman. The new 52 was full of really badly received event comics. But even among those mediocre events, Convergence is especially disliked by fans. I didn't even finish that. That was one of those I just gave up on. But however, the tie-ins, which brought back multiple fan favorite alternate versions of the DC characters, were very well received. The most beloved one in Convergence, Superman. This is the issue that brought back the pre-Flashpoint version of Superman and Lois. In that book, it also showed readers the birth of John Kent, the future Superman. And so DC continuity would change several times since Convergence Superman came out, but the birth showed in the book, second issue, has become canon. John's birth gave readers a character who will become a fan favorite and was hugely important in the Kent family. I have I I'm not gonna say he is a fan favorite of mine, but I do I do like the character. Like I said, I'm not an avid reader like I used to be. It's hard to carve out some time to read all of these issues of comic books like I used to back in my younger days. Life be lifing. So I can't really get to them as much. But when I do have time, I have read a few issues with John Kent, and yeah, he's an interesting character. He's not your daddy Superman, but he's getting there. He's getting there. Number 4, which is a huge moment in Superman comic book history. Superman marries Lois Lane. Yes, Clark Kent and Lois Lane. Will they, won't they relationship that went on for about 50 years. Uh, that has hooked people into comics for all this time. They DC finally decided to pull the trigger on their marriage. I think this was in '96 when this took place, and uh, in the issue Superman the Wedding album, Superman and Lois' wedding has become a defining trait in both of their lives. They are more than just husband and wife. They are actually a team. There have been some amazing Superman and Lois Lane stories since then. In fact, since the pre Flashpoint Kent family return, Lois has played a bigger role than ever in Superman's life. Their marriage and relationship is a fan favorite and stands tall amongst the most beloved marriages in comic book history. Coming in at number 3 is the Infinite Crisis. Infinite Crisis begins with the Justice League breaking up or being broken. The Trinity fighting amongst each other, the villains on the rise, the return of Earth 2, Superman and Lois, Superboy Prime, and Alexander Luthor. And it was crazy in that issue. By the end of it, Prime and Luthor were revealed as villains trying to remake the multiverse, and Earth 2, Superman and Lois were dead. The story killed off the Golden Age Superman and Lois Lane, which is a huge event in Superman history. However, the aftermath of the story had a huge effect on Superman. Alexander Luthor's tinkering with the multiverse brought back many of the pre-crisis aspects of Superman's history, like his time as Superboy in Smallville and his relationship with the Legion of superheroes. It was a Infinite Crisis was a big deal. It was uh, Marvel does some good event comic issues, but when DC do it, DC do it. When they actually put it together right. Speaking of which, at number 2, Crisis on Infinite Earths. This was probably uh the tour de force for DC. This was the greatest of all of their events, at least my humble opinion. The battle against the Anti-Monitor pulled the entire multiverse with the Superman of Earth 1 and Earth 2 leading the charge. Supergirl was killed in battle. You remember that iconic issue on the cover of Crisis where Superman is holding Supergirl, a dead body of Supergirl. Uh, a big loss. It was a big loss for Superman. Earth 2 Superman and Superboy Prime fought the last battle against the Anti-Monitor with not Super, but Earth's 2 Superman landing the final blow against the Anti-Monitor. Alexander Luthor rescued Earth 2 Superman and Superboy Prime, bringing them to a paradise dimension with Lois Lane. Yeah, Crisis on Infinite Earth changed the DC multiverse into the DC universe. Superman was completely changed by it. Krypton became a cold place. Superman was technically born on Earth. There was never a Superboy in Smallville, and for years, Superman was the only Kryptonian. And so Crisis completely changed Superman for years to come, until that was changed by another huge event, huge event that took place in DC. But number one is pretty much a no-brainer. I think everybody and their mama knew that this was number one. This event, when it happened, I remember a news report. It was on the news that actual real world reporters took time out the news. Yes, there was murders going on in the streets. There were all type of stuff going on that you could have been reporting on, but they took time to report on the death of Superman. This was all the channels. This comic book event literally got me back to comics. This is what got me back to reading comic books. At a time in my life when my focus had shifted to girls, and I, I had to sacrifice comic books for the attention of females in my teenage years. But when this came along, I had to kind of split time because this was a huge thing. The death of Superman. It was the biggest Superman event of the 90s. I mean, you can argue of all time, but I'm just going to relegate it to the 90s. The story of Superman's battle against Doomsday crossed through every Superman book and Justice League America issue. You had to read them all. You had to. It wasn't just one issue. It wasn't just two or three. It affected the entire DC comic because at this point they were heading towards bankruptcy. They were about to close up shop. This is why they did this. They were going to kill off Superman. They were going to make news. They were going to shock the world, and it worked. And it worked. They got everybody back to reading comic books. The backstory of the death of Superman was actually even more interesting than the story itself. The death of Superman isn't exactly a complicated story, but it did what it needed to do. It was just a massive slugfest. It was no, there was, this drew out for so long. You would think there was some story to it. There was some substance. No, it was just a slugfest for about 3 or 4 issues, man. That's all it was between Superman and Doomsday. Many fans had problems with the story because it didn't feel very Superman. But for other fans like myself, it was a watershed moment. It was a pivotal moment in comics. No one thought they'll see Superman actually die. And this story actually delivered that. It was amazing. It was awesome. As a bonus or honorable mention, I guess, since they are linked together. I guess 1A and 1B, you can say, along with the death of Superman, will be the reign of Supermen. And that was what took place after that issue when we got the return of Superman. But it was a fake out, not a fake out, but it was a mystery. Which one of these are Superman? This is where we got Steel, you had Superboy, you had the Eradicator, uh something else I can't remember, but all of these issues came out, and who was going to be the replacement or the new Superman. And all we got back was the resurrected Superman. And the way they wrote it off, it wasn't quote unquote him dying. He didn't really die. They punched themselves into a coma, both of them, Doomsday and Superman. The final blows put them in a coma or close to death or whatever the case may be. But anyways, those were some of the most important moments in Superman history that I can come up with, or should I just say my 10 favorite moments? Because everybody, it's all subjective. And I'm pretty sure everybody's screaming at their phone or tablet or whatever, wherever you listening to this on, like, oh, you left off issue 40 or issue 79 or whatever. Look, I'm sorry. I'm just going by what I remember and what I felt were important moments. And that's not to say that the other ones were unimportant. I just gravitate to these moments more. But anywho's, let's run through real quick as we approach the end of part one of this epic Superman edition of movie goodness. Let's go through Superman's abilities and his weaknesses. Going back to Action Comics issue 1 from 1938, Superman has superhuman strength. We all know that. The cover of that issue shows him effortlessly holding a car over his head. Another classic feat of strength on Superman's part was breaking steel chains. In some stories, he's strong enough to shift the orbit of planets. And he can crush coal into diamond in the bare of in the in it with his bare hands. I think we saw that on screen. I think what's that Superman 3 he did that in? It was either Superman 2 or Superman 3. I can't remember which one, but I remember him doing that on screen. Of course, he has a highly durable body. We know that bullets bounce off him harmlessly. In some stories, such as another great issue that I left off the list, Kingdom Come, not even a nuclear bomb can harm him because they dropped that on him in that issue, in that graphic novel. Kingdom Come is phenomenal. In early stories, Superman's costume is made out of this exotic material that is virtually as tough as he is. That's why you never see any bullet holes or tears or nothing like that. But in some stories, Martha Kent is the one who makes the costume for him. So I don't know, but it is said to be made out of the material that he was wrapped in, the swaddling clothes, I guess, that he was wrapped in that manger that was his spaceship. In like I mentioned before, in Action Comics #1, Superman could not fly. He traveled by running and leaping. That's how he got around. Which he could do with I guess you could say a prestigious degree thanks to his strength. Superman gained the ability to fly in the second episode of the radio serial in 1940. And so Superman can fly faster than sound. And in some stories, he can even fly faster than the sound of light can travel to distant galaxies. Yeah. So basically, the blink of an eye. He can get to here to Pluto in a blink of an eye. Superman can project X-ray vision with his eyes, which allows him to see through objects. He can. He first used this ability in comics or Action Comics number 11. Certain materials such as lead can block his X-ray vision. Superman can project beams of heat from his eyes. We all know it as heat vision, um, which can is hot enough to melt steel. Believe it or not, he first used this power in Superman number 52 by applying his X-ray vision to the highest intensity. That's how he projects the heat vision. Um, Superman can hear sounds that are too faint for a human being to hear, and I'm talking at frequencies outside of human hearing range. This ability was introduced in Action Comics number 11. Since Action Comic number 20, Superman possessed superhuman breath, which enables him to inhale or blow huge amounts of air, as well as holding his breath indefinitely to remain underwater or even in space without adverse effects. He has a significant focus on his breath's intensity to the point of freezing targets by blowing on them. The freeze breath was first demonstrated in Superman number 129. Moving on to his weaknesses, we all know the most common one, and that is green kryptonite. This radiation nullifies Superman's powers and incapacitates him with pain and nausea. Prolonging exposure will actually kill him. Although green kryptonite is the most common seen form, writers have introduced other forms over the years, such as red, gold, blue, white, and black kryptonite, each with their own particular effects. Gold kryptonite, for instance, nullifies Superman's powers, but otherwise does not harm him. Kryptonite first appeared in the 1943 radio serial. It first appeared in comics in Superman number 61. Superman is also vulnerable to magic. Enchanted weapons and magical spells affect Superman as easily as they would a normal human. This weakness was established in Superman number 171. Like all Kryptonians, Kal-El is also highly susceptible to telekinesis or illusion casting, mind control, etc. This was shown in Wonder Woman Volume 2, number 219. A powerful enough psychic can affect either the psyche or the biology of Superman to endure strokes or mangle his internal organs, as well as disrupt his mind and perceptions of the world. Something a young power amped gene bomb meta showcased in Superman number 48. Here are a few of Superman's, I guess you could say, greatest foes. We all know Lex Luthor. That's the easy one there, but you also have Bizarro, who is a clone of Superman, basically, or a flawed clone of Superman, or I think he was actually a clone of Superboy. I don't know. It depends on what issue you read. But Bizarro, you had Bloodsport, and we saw Bloodsport in this Suicide Squad, who was played by Idris Elba, and he's a villain of Superman. He actually shot Superman with a kryptonite bullet, and he actually carries around kryptonite bullets, and just in case Superman comes around. You have Brainiac, Cyborg, Superman, Darkseid, Doomsday, Eradicator, General Zod, of course, Lobo, who we will see in Supergirl. And somebody said he might pop up in this new Superman movie. In case you don't know, Jason Momoa will be playing Lobo in the DC universe. So That should be interesting. You have Manchester Black. You have Metallo. Um, who else? Parasite. The toy maker. Who else? Oh, Toy Man, not Toy Maker. Ultraman. I think he's in the movie as well. Yeah, he has a nice rogues gallery. It isn't Batman level, but it is a nice rogues gallery nonetheless. But that should wrap us up for the end of part one. Superman in comics. Like I said, one of the greatest characters in comic book history. Haven't quite captured it on a big screen perfectly yet. Yes, I know Christopher Reeves. I know. But not all those movies were great. Let's be honest. So uh haven't quite knocked it out of the park yet there. TV, TV, I can make an argument that he they did that character right television wise. That's why that'll be the next part of the Ultimate Superman edition of movie goodness when we go into part two, Superman on television. And so if you want to comment on part one, don't forget you can email the show kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also comment on all social media feeds. Just look for the KB Radio Network. Speaking of the KB Radio Network, subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube and like this video as well. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for part one of the Ultimate Superman edition as we dove into Superman in comics. I'll meet you at part two, Superman in television.